In this video, we'll talk about the mean value theorem and average value of a function. So let's determine if the mean value theorem for integrals applies to the function f of x equals cosine x on the closed interval from 0 to pi, and if so, find the x-coordinate of the point or points guaranteed to exist by the theorem. Okay, so first of all, in order for this to apply, this has to be a continuous function, which it is, and this has to be a closed interval, which it is. So we're good. The mean value theorem does apply. So what we do is use this formula for the mean value theorem for integrals. The right side here is the average value of a function. Now what this means, if you just kind of understand, it's like finding average. It's impossible to do this because we're dealing with integrals, but what you're basically doing is if you were to add up every single y value along the curve from A to B, which we can't do because there's an infinite number of them, but then divide the number of y values that we just added up, that would be your average value. It's kind of crazy. It's the same way that any other average is calculated. So anyway, on the right side, we're dealing with average value. On the left side, we're actually plugging in a function or plugging in a c into our function. So you really just take this formula as is. So f of c looks like cosine c. And then on the right side, you find average value by plugging in 1 over b minus a, which is 0 and pi here for a and b, and then we're integrating from 0 to pi. When you integrate the cosine, it's negative sign. And then we plug in. This is just a straight integration problem. The left side is following along. It's f of c the whole time. So you plug in a c for your function and just let it hang out for a few minutes. And then you integrate the right side. So we did the fundamental theorem here. And we end up actually with 0 over here because the sine of pi and sine of 0 are both 0. So it's like 0 minus 0 right there. You end up with just 0 here, which is kind of nice. And then you need to just solve for c now. That's the last step, is solving for c, and that would be your x-coordinates. So in this case, we need to undo and use the inverse cosine. So the answer to this is when the angle at which the cosine is 0. So if you look at the cosine graph, and we're talking from 0 to pi, remember? So 0 to pi is right here. Our answer would be pi over 2. That's the y equals cosine graph. If you want to deal with the inverse cosine graph, same thing, pi over 2. All right, final answer.